bags where horror lies.
Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe. I'm a regular Wednesday evening host here at Body Bags. It is week 530. Yes, I looked. I have to look these days. It is, though, the week that precedes the final week in December, and of course, our theme week here at Body Bags. It is Nordic Horror, compliments of James, our Sunday reviewer. And so all week long, last week of the month, all you're going to see is films from the Nordic land. Ought to be good. I think for my part, Dead Snow Part 2. So all films from there regionally. It ought to be a fun week to close out December and close out this year. So one may ask, this is a horror film channel, is it not? So why would I be reviewing Oppenheimer? Well, if a film is good enough to be written about in the pages of Fangoria, well, then it's good enough to be talked about here on Body Bags. And to make my point, back on June 22nd of this year, Ryan Scott wrote in the online edition, or I guess that's what you would call it, Fangoria, an article about Oppenheimer. More pointedly to the fact that, having screened the film for a friend who was a filmmaker, Christopher Nolan said that his take was, and I partially quote, "It's kind of a horror movie." And Christopher Nolan replied, "I don't disagree." And he went on to bring up the idea of nihilism and how this film has in terms of its color, a darkness that is just not present in his other films. And you know, Oppenheimer is maybe one of the more important films to have come lately, maybe in quite a while. And it is not to be outdone thematically by, I dare say, Godzilla -1. Just consider, well, two of my favorite quotes this year from film actually, respectively, come from Oppenheimer and Godzilla -1. From Oppenheimer, just so I don't goof this up, Niels Bohr, if some of you will remember, if you've seen Oppenheimer, and if you haven't, you really need to. Niels Bohr is talking Oppenheimer, and says, in terms of theory versus the practicality of being in the lab, and putting this hands-on versus just living in the world of theory, working out theory. He says to Oppenheimer, "Algebra's like sheet music. The important thing isn't can you read music, it's can you hear it. Can you hear the music, Robert?" And Oppenheimer replies, "Yes, I can." And I think, to the point of this film being adapted by American Prometheus, from the book American Prometheus, it is about listening and hearing to what the film has to say, and not so much seeing, although it is a visual feast in terms of cinematography, and the darkness that Nolan does speak of that is inherent in this film. When you're talking about maybe perhaps one of the great pivot points in world history in terms of the creation of a device that launches us into a whole new world, for without, there would be no Godzilla, and this year, of course, -1, which, the other quote, not to forget, but the other quote, I think maybe the most important quote of the entire year from a film, maybe perhaps, is very simple. Yoji Akitsu, I believe that's how you say it, one of the main characters from -1, said, "To have never gone to war is something to be proud of." That is a message that needs to be heard loud and freaking clear. I don't know if in the last 3 years, three and a half years of my life, have I ever heard the phrase nuclear exchange, nuclear war, all of this stuff used more flippantly than I have in maybe all of the years of my life wrapped up into one, as I have heard these last three and a half so years. It seems like I call them the psychotics, that some of which have their hands on the levers of power, seem not to know that message. And it just seems timely that we get a film like Oppenheimer that shows us theoretically and in all practical terms the development of perhaps the weapon that is the one of the main pivot points of world history and launching us into a whole new, albeit very, very scary and horrifying world, especially for those on the ground at the receiving end, not once but twice, of course, to close out the great world war that is World War II. And minus one that shows us from its creation to, at least from a fictional point of view, its implementation and destructiveness and the sense of lives shattered in Japan in the days following, and all, of course, that Godzilla represents in terms of this new world that we have been thrusted in. Is it accident that these two films, which serve as companions to one another, I think, have come out this year? I think not. But we do, as a people, do have a weird affection with the end of the world, and since that point forward, of course, much of our thoughts in terms of the end of the world do come as a result of a devastating exchange, which I would hope most of us in this listening, hearing me, would all agree wholeheartedly that this is our worst nightmare, right? Cillian Murphy, this cast is insane. Cillian Murphy, who is, of course, J. Robert Oppenheimer. Isn't it weird that he is on the receiving end of a world gone just mad in terms of an apocalyptic scenario. 28 days later, wakes up in a bed and the whole world is upside down. Now he is the one who leads the world into this possibility with Oppenheimer. Just kind of weird how those two bookend each other. Emily Blunt, of course, is fantastic. Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Jason Clarke, and maybe the one that actually steals the show for me, Casey Affleck. Is just awesome. Reminds me of the opening 10, 12, or 10, 15 minutes of Inglourious Basterds, the Tarantino flick. Absolutely just wow. Kenneth Branagh, Tom Conti is Albert Einstein, which I absolutely loved and could have gotten a lot more of. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The cast is insane. The cinematography is out of this world, but it deals with a topic so frightening to the imagination. I have to say that of all the worst nightmares I have ever had in my lifetime, either they involve either one of two things. Funny, sharks, probably because I sat in a theater at 5 seeing Jaws, and seeing a nuclear explosion. Both always seem to rattle me awake. It is a fear that I have that will live long enough to see such a thing, and I hope and I pray that we don't. This movie, it also, and the other reason to really think about this movie and watch it and own it is Christopher Nolan, of course, made a plea to people that if you saw this in the theater and enjoyed it, as a responsibility to take care and take ownership of all that we love, and that is film, that we had a responsibility really to purchase the physical media. And as Jason says, physical media matters, maybe more so today than it has ever meant before. This release of Oppenheimer on 4K is absolutely, it's pretty astonishing, the amount of work that they put into it. I think Nolan is right. If we love physical media, if we love film, we have a responsibility. And this is sort of what you get, right? It's pretty amazing. Seems rather simplistic, but there are 3 discs in there, and the supplemental disc has a couple really phenomenal. One in particular is an 80-minute documentary that really serves as a nice companion piece to the film. I did watch it once. And it does fill in some of the holes. And I would dare say, too, I rewatched this film this morning. It's almost 3 hours. This morning in my movie room down here in the pitch black at about 5 a.m. with coffee. And I just took it in. And, and I've heard one of the criticisms. By the way, I'm dropping 3 pretty intriguing podcasts. One I found that I really enjoyed that deals with Oppenheimer. Another one that deals with -1 that I really thoroughly enjoyed. And then another one is actually Jordan Peterson had Neil Ferguson on talking about the end of the world scenario, apocalyptic endings and whatnot. His new book that's a couple years old, Doom, The Politics of Catastrophe. But Oppenheimer comes up in the discussion towards the end. It's only an hour long. And I found it really, really fascinating to listen to. Because we do have this strange attraction with the end, don't we? We see it in cinema, and maybe more so in the last 10, 15, 20 years or something. I mean, we have just the advent of The Walking Dead and 28 Days Later, and just one apocalyptic vision after another. It's just breathtaking how much the apocalypse, and however we visualize it or are fascinated by it, how many or how often we just continually see this unfold before us. And Oppenheimer perhaps maybe is the gateway into a new frightening vision of what this may look like before the Manhattan Project. Of course, war, did encompass the globe, not once, twice, but really if you look back at the 7 Years' War, which might be the first real global war, unless you want to go back to the Phoenicians back in those days when really the world as it was known was encompassed in a civil war of sorts. But really since the 7 Years' War, World War I, World War II. But World War II, in its ending, opens up a brand new, horrific world of possibilities. One that has been, I think, one that has plagued many of our nightmares. I mean, especially at the moment of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the fear of an exchange. But like I said, in the last three and a half years, it seems like there are some people who, and I have no idea how could you understand psychotic people, but it just seems like those who are at the very top of that control things, it's almost like they want it or something. And I can't wrap my mind around that concept, but it just seems to me personally, and I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand. But Nolan, I heard Nolan's cry, and of course I do have this. Actually, compliments that my son got it for me, which I'm very thankful for. This is an important film. -1 is an important film. Both thematically walk hand in hand. They -1 is like a companion piece to Oppenheimer, and the rallying cry ought to be, to have never gone to war is something to be proud of, and we ought not ever want to know what that's like. I'm a bit of a student of history, and I've read enough books. I served for 4 years in the infantry, and for at least a couple of weeks, I trained as though I was supposed to see Desert Storm. Never did, and for that I'm thankful for. I did my duty for king and country, I guess, and I did it, and I did it. But where the world is today, I don't want my kids to see that. I don't want my children to have to go through that. And I think Oppenheimer and Godzilla -1 is comes at an interesting time for us. it ought to give us a lot to think about, to contemplate, to meditate on, and to be really thankful for the things that we have, especially here in this country. It's just, anyways, Oppenheimer really is about it is about the development of the atomic bomb, which is a race against time. It's a race against the Nazis having it first, and that's where once the Nazi Empire collapses from the weight of both the Soviets and the Allies, the U.S., then unfortunately it turns to, okay, well, now we're on the verge of having this weapon. How can we use it? Well, Japan, is unfortunately, Japan is going to be on the receiving end of this. And there are a lot of debate and arguments as to the morality of that. I found this scene in Oppenheimer, I wasn't sure how to take it initially at first, but if you give Truman the benefit of the doubt, you have to accept his point in terms of being angry with Oppenheimer for even suggesting that Oppenheimer is the one that truly has blood on his hands, when Truman is the one who made the decision and would carry it to his grave to drop the bomb. It's not Oppenheimer who drops it. It's Oppenheimer who is the man who is the main force behind its creation. But in terms of its utilization, Truman will decide and has to live with that, and has, and gone on, and we'll never know on this side of eternity how all that shaped out for him. But that just kind of brought us into this new world, and that is a horrifying thing. There's nothing not horrifying about this film or what it represents, the possibilities again of such an end. And so it was written about in Fangoria. So I mean, and if some look at this and seem to be, to think it's a horror film or a type of, at least, I think they're right. It is an absolute fascinating but be it scary. And I know some criticism have been leveled because it didn't show enough of the Japanese receiving end of this, although they also really didn't, delve much deep into what led Japan to that moment and the years leading up to that moment, which can't be ignored. That does not necessarily justify it, but it is a part of history, and unfortunately, it was created and it was utilized, and now we live in a world where at any given moment, seemingly, we can just obliterate our existence with an exchange or two, and that is a terrifying possibility. But it's probably best at least thought about and met and reasoned with and not ignored. And I think Oppenheimer comes at a very, plus with the war of physical media and how important physical media is and should be to all of us. I think the tide seems to be turning just ever so slightly in terms of people waking up and realizing the importance of physical media, and that should be very important. So anyways, I've gone way too long for a Body Bags video, so my apologies, but really I think it's an important subject matter to be thought about. And if you haven't seen Oppenheimer yet, definitely do check it out. And if there's any way your resources allow you to, you ought to really pick it up. It's worth it. The documentary is great. And don't forget about American Prometheus. Don't forget about the links. That is the book it's based on. Don't forget about my links down there if they intrigue you. And also, I did not drop the link to the Fangoria article, but I gave enough information that it would take you 2 seconds to pull it up. So anyways, week 530, maybe a different type of film, but one that is important regardless, I think. As always, all my hopes, all my best wishes in terms of the season. It is December and we are getting very close to Christmas. Enjoy Nordic horror, our theme week at the end. And as always, we end these things off with Go Bills.
This is not a dream. Not a dream.
We might be useful to you.